You know, Mamdani just won. And I've been watching this race closely, not because I have a horse in it, but because it tells us something important about where we're heading, about what people want, and more importantly, what happens when someone promises big change and then actually has to deliver it. So let's talk about what comes next, because winning an election, that's the easy part. Governing, that's where things get real. Mamdani ran on a platform that most people would call ambitious. Some would say bold. Others might say unrealistic. Rent freezes, free public transit, or heavily subsidized, depending on which version you heard, universal child care. Higher taxes on wealthy folks like me, I suppose. Even city-run grocery stores. Now, before you tell me what you think about those policies, let me tell you what I think is actually interesting here. It's not whether these are good ideas or bad ideas. It's whether they're doable ideas. Because there's a big difference between what sounds good on a campaign trail and what actually works when you're sitting in that office looking at the budget, dealing with the bureaucracy, negotiating with people who don't necessarily share your vision. And that's what we're about to find out. See, Mamdani's victory, and it was decisive from what I understand, it signals something. A shift, particularly within the Democratic Party. You've got a progressive candidate, a genuine left-wing candidate by American standards, winning in a major city. That doesn't happen by accident. That means there's appetite for this kind of politics, real appetite. But appetite doesn't pay bills. Appetite doesn't navigate city council meetings. Appetite doesn't deal with state legislatures that might have different priorities. So the test case begins. Can a candidate like this actually implement big structural change, or do the realities of governance, budgets, institutions, opposition, bureaucracy, do they grind those ambitions down into something much more modest? I don't know the answer yet. Nobody does. But I'm watching. And if you care about where cities are going, where progressive politics is going, where the conversation about inequality in public services is going, you should be watching too. Let me break down what I'm looking for, what the actual indicators of success or failure will be. First, the first 100 days. Now, I know that's a cliche. Every new leader gets measured by their first 100 days. But there's a reason for that. It's when you have maximum political capital, maximum momentum, maximum attention. If you're going to do something big, that's when you do it. Mamdani takes office, I believe it's January 1st, 2026, and immediately the clock starts ticking. What's his first move? What does he prioritize? Because you can't do everything at once. You can't implement rent freezes and free transit and universal child care and new taxes all in month one. You have to sequence it. You have to pick your battles. So which battle does he pick first? My guess, and it's just a guess, is that he goes after something visible, something people can feel quickly. Maybe transit, because that affects everyone every day. Maybe rent policy, because that's existential for so many New Yorkers. But whatever it is, that first move, it sets the tone. It tells you whether he's serious about implementation or whether he's going to get bogged down in process. And here's the thing about process. It kills momentum. I've seen it 1,000 times. Someone comes in with big ideas, spends 6 months setting up committees, doing studies, building consensus, and by the time they're ready to act, the moment's passed. The energy's gone. People have moved on. So watch how fast he moves. Speed matters. Second thing I'm watching, which parts of his agenda actually get traction and which parts hit walls, because they won't all succeed equally. Some of these proposals, they're going to face enormous resistance. Budget constraints, for one. Cities don't have unlimited money. They can't print currency like the federal government. They've got to balance budgets. They've got bond ratings to maintain. They've got pension obligations, infrastructure needs, existing commitments. So when Mamdani proposes free public transit, the question isn't, is that nice? The question is, where does the money come from? Does he raise taxes, cut other services, find efficiencies, get state or federal help? Same with rent freezes. Sounds great if you're a tenant, but landlords, they're going to push back. Property owners, real estate interests, developers, they have lawyers, they have lobbyists, they have political connections. They're not just going to accept policies that hurt their bottom line without a fight. And city-run grocery stores, I mean, that's a genuinely radical idea in the American context. Governments running grocery stores. You're competing with private enterprise. You're taking on logistics, supply chains, operations. Things that most city governments aren't set up to do. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But it's going to be complicated. So I'm watching which pieces move forward and which pieces get quietly shelved or watered down, because that tells you where the real power is, where the constraints are, what's actually possible within the system. Third, how he communicates with constituents. This is something people underestimate. Managing expectations. You've made big promises. People voted for you because of those promises. But now you're in office and reality is setting in. Things take longer than you thought. Things cost more than you thought. Opposition is stronger than you thought. How do you keep people on your side while you're working through all that? Does Mamdani set clear timelines? Does he say, we're going to have universal child care in place by end of year 2? Or does he keep things vague, talk about working toward goals without concrete commitments? Does he prioritize transparently? Does he say, look, we want to do 10 things, but we've got resources for 3, so here's what we're doing first and here's why? Does he build coalitions? Does he bring in community groups, unions, businesses, even the ones who didn't support him, and try to find common ground? Or does he govern as a movement leader, rallying his base but alienating everyone else? Leadership styles matter. And in a city as complex as New York, with as many competing interests, you can't just dictate from the top. You've got to build consensus. You've got to negotiate. You've got to bring people along. I'll be watching how he does that, because if he gets that right, even if some policies fail, he can maintain support. If he gets it wrong, even if some policies succeed, he'll lose people. Fourth, key appointments. Show me your team, and I'll tell you what you really believe. Mamdani needs to pick a cabinet, senior city roles, advisors. Who does he choose? Are they experienced administrators who know how city government works? Or are they true believers from the campaign, ideologically aligned, but maybe lacking operational expertise? Are they diverse? Do they reflect the coalition that elected him? Different communities, different backgrounds, different perspectives, or do they all look the same, come from the same circles? Do they have political skills? Can they work with city council, negotiate with state officials, manage bureaucracies? Or are they bomb throwers who will make headlines but struggle to actually get things done? I've seen this pattern before. New leader comes in, brings in people they're comfortable with, people who share their vision. And that's natural. You want loyalty, you want alignment. But if you don't also have competence, if you don't have people who know how to navigate the system, your vision stays a vision. It never becomes reality. So I'll be looking at the names he announces, the backgrounds, the track records. That'll tell us a lot about what's actually going to happen over the next few years. Fifth, and this is crucial, his relationship with state institutions. New York City doesn't operate in isolation. It's part of New York State. And the state legislature up in Albany, they control a lot of what the city can and cannot do. budget authority, regulatory power, policy decisions. So much of it flows through Albany. And here's the thing. The state legislature might not be as progressive as Mamdani. The governor might have different priorities. There might be political tensions, personality conflicts, competing visions for what New York should be. So how does Mamdani navigate that? Does he work collaboratively with Albany, build relationships, find ways to align interests, or does he pick fights, go public with criticism, try to pressure them through media and grassroots organizing? Both approaches can work depending on the situation, but you've got to be strategic about it. You've got to know when to negotiate quietly and when to make noise. You've got to understand the power dynamics, the leverage points, the art of political deal making, because if Albany becomes an obstacle, if the state is blocking what the city wants to do, a lot of Mamdani's agenda becomes very difficult, maybe impossible. I'm not saying he should compromise on everything, but he's got to be smart about which battles to fight and which ones to finesse. Now, let me step back for a moment and talk about why this matters beyond just New York City, because Mamdani's victory, his governance, it's going to be watched nationally. Progressives around the country are going to look at this as a model. Can you run on bold economic populism and not just win, but actually deliver? Can you take on wealth inequality, housing costs, public services, the stuff people actually care about, and make a difference? Or do you hit the same walls everyone hits, budget constraints, political opposition, bureaucratic inertia, economic realities that don't bend just because you want them to? This becomes a test case. And depending on how it goes, you'll see other candidates, other cities, other movements either embrace this approach or back away from it. If Mamdani succeeds, if he actually implements meaningful rent relief, if he expands child care, if he makes transit more accessible, then you'll see more candidates running on similar platforms. You'll see the Overton window shift. What seemed radical becomes mainstream. If he fails or if he gets bogged down and accomplishes very little, then the narrative becomes, see, it sounds good, but it doesn't work. You can't actually do this stuff. It's not realistic. And that narrative affects elections for years to come. So yeah, I'm paying attention, not because I'm particularly invested in municipal politics, but because this is a signal, a leading indicator. It tells us something about where the political conversation is going, what voters want, what's actually achievable in the American system. Here's my prediction, and take it with whatever grain of salt you want. Mamdani will accomplish some things. He'll have wins. There'll be programs that launch, policies that get implemented, changes that happen, and those will be meaningful for the people they affect. But he won't accomplish